أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فوجد عبدا من عبادنا آتيناه رحمة من عندنا وعلمناه من لدنا علما قال له موسى هل أتبعك على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا وكيف تصبر على ما لم تحط به خبرا صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات اللهم صل على محمد. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Inshallah, the topic that we will begin discussing tonight and some of the nights moving forward is the topic of the story of Musa and Khidr alayhi salam. Two characters that of course are very special for us. One of them we know very well. Musa alayhi salam, of course, is one of the greatest prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's a prophet that's revered in multiple faiths around the world, in Islam and in Christianity and in Judaism. But you find that the other character in this story, Khidr alayhi salam, is somewhat of a mysterious character, somewhat of a mysterious figure. And the Quran quite often brings up figures and characters that it doesn't shed too much light on. You find in the story of Fir'aun as well, the story of Ibrahim and the story of some of the other prophets of God, characters will enter into particular scenes from the story. And the Quran might even refer to them with a very generic term. Sometimes in the Quran says there were prophets of God that were in trouble. وَجَاءَ رَجُلٌ مِّنْ أَقْصَى الْمَدِينَةِ يَسْعَى. All of a sudden a man from far away came running and he tried to save the life of this prophet. In another story, you read, for example, Mu'min al Fir'aun, the believer amongst the people of Fir'aun. Who is Mu'min al Fir'aun? Who is this rajul, this man who's running from far away? The Quran has a habit of bringing up different characters that it doesn't necessarily share too much light on or shed too much light on. But at the end of the day, the Quran is sharing important lessons and principles to be learned from that character, and that is what we want to focus on. The story of Musa and Khidr has two main themes, and these themes apply to our lives very much today as well. The first of those themes is the theme of wisdom and waiting to see why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to do certain things within our lives. This is a very important thing that we have to learn, because in today's world, things happen, we may not necessarily know the wisdom behind them. We may not know the reason behind them. And in the story of Musa and Khidr in particular, you find the events that Khidr not only is a part of them, but is actually causing them to happen himself, are events that you might look at and generally consider to be pure evil. Khidr, at one point, what does he do? As we'll read in the story and discuss in the story, he ends up creating a hole or ruining the boat or a ship of two young men. This, if you're looking at this from far away, you say this is very evil. If these two young men came home that day and they said our ship or boat has a hole in it, you would say this is a very unfortunate event. Not only is Khidr part of this story, he's the one who's creating these problems, at least from our angle, from the materialistic perspective. Later on, as we'll discuss in the story, Khidr does something else. It ends up to this person losing his life. And again, this is something we would consider pure evil. Taking the life of another person is nothing small. It is one of the greatest sins of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yet Khidr is part of this, and as the story unfolds, there is wisdom behind some of these events that take place. The first of those themes is the theme of wisdom. The second of the themes in the story of Khidr and Musa is the theme of mentorship. It's very beautiful how you will see Khidr alayhi salam, regardless of whether he is considered a prophet or not, because there's dispute about this area of the discussion. Regardless of what exactly his station and his position is, it's very beautiful to see how Khidr takes his time and eases Musa alayhi salam into the wisdom behind each of these three tests or events that take place. Mentorship is something you and I deal with. When we raise families, you as a father, as a mother, you're mentoring your children. Sometimes even spouses end up mentoring one another in particular aspects that the other spouse might have a weakness in. And learning from the mentorship of Khidr is very helpful, because you'll see the patience that Khidr employs to ease Musa into these lessons that Musa is going to learn. That patience and those types of mentorship we also have to implicate or also employ in our day-to-day lives as well, with our children, sometimes maybe within our elder parents who might be struggling with understanding something, or even with our peers and our spouses. Inshallah, tonight we'll begin with the story of Musa and Khidr alayhi salam, and we'll begin by posing the following questions. Number one, when we say Khidr had the name Khidr, this title that he had, what is the literal meaning behind this name? And why was he even given the title Khidr? And does the Quran end up mentioning his name? Or is this a name that comes from narrations and from ahadith? Number two, if Khidr lived during the time of Musa alayhi salam, does the Bible, the Old Testament, also make reference to the story of Musa and Khidr with all of these different lessons? Or is this a story that's exclusive only to the verses of the Quran? Number three, is it true that Khidr continues to live up until today? Was he like Isa alayhi salam, who never died and continues to have a prolonged life? And if that is the case, how would I answer a question if someone came forward and said, how is it possible for someone to live this long? And why is it that the Shia believe that Khidr, for example, or that the 12th Imam in particular, are able to live very long lives? And number four, and finally, what lesson can we learn from the story of Musa and Khidr when Musa alayhi salam, even though he is a prophet of God himself, and he is a ulul azm prophet of God, in fact, ends up becoming a student, a disciple, a pupil of a great master and a great teacher himself. Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into these four questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So Khidr is given this title. There's discussions in the narrations as to whether this was actually his name or it wasn't his name. It was just a title that he was given. And it seems as though it was more of a title than a name for him. And the narration that Ilal al-Shara'i' mentions, the book of Shaykh al-Saduq, very early book of ours, he mentions why Khidr was given this title. The hadith goes on something like this. It says that Khidr alayhi salam used to be a prophet of God. And as part of his prophethood, he was granted a particular miracle. The miracle of Khidr was what? Was that anywhere he would go and anything that he would touch, if it was a piece of wood, for example, if it was a stick, or it was a barren land, anywhere Khidr would go, he had the ability to have that piece of stick or wood or that land begin to flourish and begin to grow. Hence, he was given the title Khidr, which comes from the color green in Arabic, yes? So the narration says he was given this as a sign to his people. He called his people to Tawheed as well, just like Musa alayhi salam was calling his people to Tawheed. But as you will see, the mission that Musa alayhi salam had and the mission that Khidr had were very different from one another. And that's why this story makes for a very beautiful themes and lines in it, because the way Musa is approaching things and the way Khidr is approaching things, fundamentally different from one another. This is where the name Khidr comes from. How much do we know about Khidr alayhi salam? The reality is he's one of those mysterious figures, one of those mysterious characters that the Quran does not even mention his name. The only thing the Quran does is that it says in the story of Musa, there was a special servant of ours when Musa and his companion, which we will explain who that companion is, they came to this special servant of God. They asked the special servant of God to do what? To guide them and to teach them of the knowledge that they were given. So the Quran doesn't even mention his name. All it says is what? Abdan min ibadina, a servant from amongst our servants. But when you look into the rest of our narrations, you find that the Ahlul Bayt had some sort of a connection with Khidr, partially because, based on our narrations, Khidr was one of those individuals who did not die. The narrations seem to indicate to us that he is one of those individuals like Isa alayhi salam, who at least until the time of the Ahlul Bayt continued to live. This is the general understanding within our school of thought. The Sunni school of thought has their own understanding on this issue. But it seems as though he was one of those individuals who was able to live a very long life. Why is that? Well, the narration of the Ahlul Bayt tells us that Khidr got his hands on something, whatever it might have been. This is the mysterious part of the story. Whatever it might have been, he got his hands through the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this water or this liquid that the Quran refers to as ma'ul hayat, the water or the drink of life or immortality. And multiple narrations indicate that Khidr drank from that liquid or that water, and because of that, he was given a prolonged life. Now, is this literally a water or a liquid or something of that sort? We don't know. Could it be a metaphor for something else? We don't know. This is the wording that you find in some of these narrations. So, Khidr is living a very long life. Normally, when the idea of someone living a very long life comes up, typically if a non-Muslim hears this, or even sometimes within our own schools of thought in Islam, someone hears that this person is living a very long life, this is met with mockery. Meaning people will sit back and say, yeah, Sheikh, these are myths. What do you mean? So you're telling me someone has been living for 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 years, whatever the case might be. Yeah, this is stuff that people made up. It's legends. And this is impossible. God doesn't do this stuff. Sometimes it might be a non-believer who might bring up the question in this way. And that's less of an issue, because a non-believer doesn't look at this world with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the top. He's fully in power. He has full control and authority. He's running this whole show. So for him, it's understandable if he comes forward and says, how is it possible for someone to live this long? He's looking at things simply from the angle of science and his own knowledge. This is understandable. Sometimes between schools of thought, you will find this mockery happening. And this is a problem. So this Shia individual believes that the 12th Imam has been born and he continues to live until today. He believes, for example, that Khidr alayhi salam was born many, many years ago and he continues to live until today. This is a stronger opinion amongst our scholars when it comes to Khidr alayhi salam. Okay. Then this person will come, say, yes, you Shia, you've come up with these ideas, these myths, these legends. You're telling me there's this guy, he can't be found anywhere, he's been living in the middle of nowhere, continues to live, and then he's going to come at the end of the time, so on and so forth. But you find both schools of thought have individuals within them who seem to be living for a very long time. And somehow each school of thought, when it comes to their own individual who's living a long time, it doesn't seem very odd to them. It's completely acceptable. But when the other school of thought brings up the same thing, all of a sudden it becomes what? Becomes a problem. You find this in our school of thought? You find it in other schools of thought as well. So I'll give you some examples because this has community implications. Of those individuals that some Sunni scholars believe is living and has been living for over 1,000 years now is Dajjal. Dajjal, the narration in Sahih Muslim, it's a very well-known narration in fact, indicates that Dajjal has been alive since the time of the prophets. This is a narration known as Hadith al-Jassasa, or sometimes they call it Hadith Tamim ad-Dari. What is the narration and the story in this hadith? They say the Prophet one day, he gathered everyone in the masjid. And there's this lady by the name of Fatima. It's a different Fatima, of course. She is narrating this story in Sahih Muslim. She says the Prophet gathered everyone in the masjid, said we're going to pray. So they all prayed together, because when the Prophet calls for everyone to come, everyone's going to gather. They all prayed together. Afterwards, the Prophet said, do not leave the places of your prayer. Stay where you are, because I want to share things with you. So, Ya Rasulullah, what's the news that you've brought us all to the masjid? We've all prayed. You're telling us not to leave either. He said, because today there was a person, his name is Tamim ad-Dari. This man has come, he was on a trip. He has now returned from this trip. He has shared with me an experience that completely validates what I have always been telling you about the Dajjal. What the experience of this person is shows that what I've said about the Dajjal is very true. What is it, Ya Rasulullah, that you're saying about the Dajjal? That the Dajjal has been alive for many years and will be alive from his time all the way until the end of times before he actually comes forward. The Antichrist actually comes forward. And then the Prophet begins to explain the story that Tamim was on a ship. They landed on an island. They went in this island. They saw this creature that was mysterious. They asked him, who are you? He said, I am Masih. Because that's part of the trick of Dajjal. He doesn't say I'm Dajjal. That's the whole point. He introduces himself as Masih. He said, I am Masih. When God gives me permission at the end of times, I will begin my movement and I will begin to bring justice and so on and so forth. The Prophet said, what Tamim saw validates what I was telling you all along. So within the Sunni school of thought, the idea that Dajjal is living for many years, for some scholars, is an understood fact. Now when you tell this Shia person that the Sunnis, some of them believe that Dajjal is alive, you will see the smirk on their face. You'll see the smile on their face, like, what kind of nonsense is this? What, are you kidding me? Are you joking? Somewhere on some island in the middle of nowhere? This is our reaction sometimes. Well, guess what that Sunni person has as a reaction when you tell him the 12th Imam has been living for this many years and that many years? Though your belief might be correct and his belief might be incorrect. That's understood. But mockery and sitting there and saying, what kind of myths are these? This is not the way to discuss these situations. Within our school of thought, we believe Khidr continues to live. Other schools of thought don't necessarily share this belief of ours. Neither can we mock their beliefs, nor do they have the permission to mock our beliefs. We have our narrations. They don't believe a lot of what we believe in. And similarly, the other way around as well. Nonetheless, the narrations seem to indicate that Khidr has been living a very long life, and he had a relationship with the Ahlul Bayt such that he used to come and visit the Ahlul Bayt. And this is why we find this narration from the 8th Imam, Al-Imam al-Ridha, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, in which he said, Shariba min ma'il hayat. Khidr drank from the water of immortality. Hayyun la yamut. He is alive. He does not die. Hatta yunfakha fis sur. Until the trumpet is blown into. Wa innahu la ya'tina. And Khidr comes and visits us. This is not the only narration that indicates this. There's some other narrations also in which the first Imam, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, used to have conversations or even public gatherings, and a man would approach the gathering and ask him questions. And after he was gone, the first Imam turned to some of his companions and said, do you know who this was? They said, no, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, we don't know who he was. He said in some narrations, Hada akhi al-Khidr. This is my brother, Khidr alayhi salam. In this narration, the 8th Imam says, وَإِنَّهُ لَيَأْتِينَا. He comes to us, فَيُسَلِّمْ فَيَسْمَعُ صَوْتَهُ. He comes and he gives his greetings to us. We hear his voice, وَلَا نَرَى شَخْصَهُ, but we don't see his body. وَإِنَّهُ لَيَحْذُرُ حَيْثُ مَا ذُكِرْ. And the narration continues from this point onward. So it seems as though Khidr alayhi salam has some sort of a connection with the Ahlul Bayt. The details we'll set aside because the details are all narrations that we can't necessarily rely on. Okay, wonderful. Where does the story of Musa and Khidr start from? Because Musa at this point, it seems as though the story begins after he's already become a prophet of God. He's already gone through the trials with Fir'aun. He's already saved Bani Israel. This is all after all of this has begun. Now Musa alayhi salam, according to some narrations, both Shia and Sunni have narrated this, Musa alayhi salam was speaking to his people. And as part of the speech that he was giving, as part of the talk that he was giving, then he turned to people and he said, as far as I know, the most knowledgeable of God on earth is me, because I am his prophet, and so on and so forth. And the narration says in his own heart, this is what crossed his mind. There's no one else more knowledgeable out there. Now, of course, Musa is not one to become arrogant. It seems as though this was a thought that crossed his mind. And why wouldn't it cross his mind? When you're a prophet of God and ulul azm, your understanding naturally is there's probably no one else out there who has this type of knowledge. When this thought crossed his mind, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to Jibreel, go and speak to my servant, because there is someone out there that from certain angles has more knowledge than Musa. He knows certain secrets that Musa does not know. So you can imagine this is a bit uncomfortable for us to hear, because Musa is Musa. This is one of the greatest prophets of God. But then the narrations tell us, no, what Musa knew, he was more knowledgeable than Khidr. But in particular areas, Khidr had more knowledge than him. So overall, he was still the most knowledgeable of all. But in particular areas, Khidr had more knowledge compared to Musa. This was revealed to Jibreel. Jibreel came to Musa. Said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, there is a servant of his. He has a knowledge that you don't have. And you are to go and meet him where the two bodies of water meets. This was his sign. Majma' al-Bahrain. That's where you're going to go and find this special servant of ours. So what does Musa alayhi salam say? And the Quran narrates this as well. The moment Musa alayhi salam was told this, he started to head out with his companion, and he told his companion, which we will explain who his companion was momentarily. He told his companion, I will not stop until I meet this person who has this knowledge, so that I can gain this knowledge from him. And in this is one of the biggest lessons of the story of Musa and Khidr. Why? Because imagine you're Musa. Imagine you're one of God's greatest prophets of all time. You've brought people out of the rule of the Pharaoh. You've done things no one else has done. You've split the sea in front of people's eyes. And then the revelation comes, oh, by the way, there are some things you don't know. You have to go learn it from someone else. Now this somebody else, is he a prophet of God or is he just a servant of God? The Quran also is not clear about this. That's why our scholars have difference of opinion on this. But regardless, if it's you and me, we'd be sitting there but like, excuse me, I thought I was like the big deal here. I thought I'm like, the big shot here. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Musa alayhi salam, what does Musa say? Musa said, I will not stop until I learn from that servant of God. This is a huge lesson for you and I. Part of the reason why, brothers and sisters, we're held back in life is because we're not open to learning from others. It's difficult for us. And this is something our younger generation struggles with. Our younger generation struggles with this. What does that mean? Imagine someone comes to them, oh, you're not supposed to be doing this. You're not supposed to be doing that. Obviously, the feedback you get from another person doesn't always come with roses. It doesn't always come from the most understanding people of all. It's not going to come from a prophet of God. It comes from this person, your cousin, your brother, your sister, your friend, your aunt, your uncle, anyone. Okay, so do all of these people know how to package their advice very beautifully so when you hear it, you don't feel offended or you don't feel upset? Or no, that's not how life works. The way life works is something comes to the mind of some person, they come and tell you. You should be doing this. Oh, this clothing you have on is like this. Oh, that thing you did in your salat is wrong. This is how life is. Okay, now should this person think twice before he opens his mouth to give his advice, to package it in a way that's more acceptable? Sure. Hopefully we've talked about that in the past. But, and this is the important thing for everyone here who's under the age of 30. Yes? You're under the age of 30. This is very important for you. Important for after that too, but even more important if you're young. I'm just going to act like I'm under 30 right now, okay? Very important. When you are given feedback, when you are in a position to learn from somebody else, set aside your emotions for a second, even if that person doesn't know how to speak well. Even if that person speaks in a little bit of a harsh way, even if that person doesn't know how to package their advice based on the teachings of Quran and Hadith, even if they don't know that, consider what they're saying. Consider their piece of advice. How often do you see people will sit there and say, oh, this person came and said this and that. Okay, they shouldn't have said it in that way. But is there truth in what they're saying? Are they right? Sheikh, my mother, she comes and she says stuff very harshly, and she says it like this, and she says it like that. Okay, well, your mother's not supposed to be speaking to you harshly. Definitely. But having set that aside, is there truth to what she's saying? My father comes and criticizes this and criticizes that, and so on and so forth. My cousin, my aunt, my uncle, sometimes even my children. And you'll have adults, now their children are speaking to them. Oh, but they need to do this and they need to do that. Okay, they should speak better. But advice that comes your way doesn't always come in a pack of roses. We have to understand this. And in this generation that's coming up, this is one of the biggest flaws. Why? Because generally if the advice is not given to us in a beautiful way, immediately we will reject it. It made me feel this way. It made me feel that way. Okay, so it made you feel that way. Was there any truth to it? Did you ever consider that even? You know why this is the case? Because if someone else comes and gives that same exact advice to this person and says it in a nice way, they'll accept it. This is a flaw that we have. Yes, that person needs to learn how to give advice. I'm not denying that at all. That's very true. But you can't wait until everyone in the world learns how to give proper advice before you start to look for truth and consider the feedback that's being given to you. So life was going to come at us in all different forms and shapes. Sometimes what stops us is the way this person said this. Sometimes what stops us, brothers and sisters, is a little bit of being impressed with myself. And this is why the first Imam, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says the moment, it's a very beautiful narration. It's only like 3 or 4 words. He said, Al-i'jab yamna'ul izdiyad. I'jab means what? When you're impressed with yourself. He said, Al-i'jab yamna'ul izdiyad. The moment you become impressed with yourself, there's no more growth anymore. The moment you sit back and you say, hey, I'm doing pretty well. And then you sit back with that pride in your heart, that's it, you're not growing anymore. At this point, you will remain where you are, or what will happen? You will decrease in where you are. Yes? No, alhamdulillah, I've done good, and there's a lot more for me to learn. And I will learn even if the feedback is not necessarily given to me in the best way. Make that your mindset. And inshallah, those who are giving advice, they have to learn to give advice in a good way as well. I'm telling you, I grew up with 2 older siblings, yeah? When you grow up with 2 older siblings, you grow up with very tough, rough skin, and it's not thick skin. But it's a blessing. It's a blessing because you learn, let me consider what is being said, not necessarily how what is being said is affecting my emotions. It's not about you. It's about you learning and growing in this process. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came and told Musa, "Oh Musa, there's a servant of ours. He has more knowledge than you. By the way, you have to go run after him. You have to go search for him to learn this knowledge." And Musa told his companion, "You know what? Not only will I not reject that opportunity, in fact, I will go searching and demanding that opportunity." This is the humility of Musa alayhi salam. So Musa alayhi salam is now going to start on this journey with a companion of his. Who is the companion of Musa? The companion of Musa is a student of Musa himself. This shows the humility of Musa even more, because he himself has students of his own. Who is the student of Musa alayhi salam? This is a young man by the name of Yusha ibn Nun. In English, we would refer to him as Joshua, who later became the successor of Musa alayhi salam. Yes? Because every prophet of God, we believe, before they left, there was a successor that they left behind. Harun initially was the successor of Musa alayhi salam. But of course, Harun left this world before Musa left this world. Hence, the one who actually received the successorship of Musa alayhi salam ended up being who? This young man by the name of Yusha ibn Nun. If you look at Isa alayhi salam, he also had a successor. His successor's name in Arabic is referred to as Sham'un. In English, we call him Peter, one of the 12 disciples. Ibrahim had his own successor. Nuh had his own successor by the name of Sam in Arabic. And in English, they refer to him as Shem. Every one of the prophets of God had their own successors. So Musa alayhi salam now tells his companion, me and you, both of us, have to go and learn from the servant of God. Where will we meet him? At the point where there is Majma'ul Bahrain, at the point where the two bodies of water come together. What will happen between Musa and Khidr alayhi salam? What they will learn, how they will even run in to Khidr alayhi salam, all of that inshallah we'll leave for tomorrow night. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant all of us our hajat and requests during these special nights inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free all of our brothers and sisters who are in difficulty and in pain inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala last but not least, to hasten the return of our beloved 12th Imam, bin Nabiyyi wa alih, rahimallahu man qara'a surat al-Fatiha ma'as salawat.